Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This Dendrobium set, I'm going to come at it from a different angle. The one that I posted, part one, worked okay by using the lower classification name, Callistas. But once you got into the contents of that thing, you realise that the care for the individuals that I've got can be quite different. And it's not that important a set, quite honestly. It really isn't. And the more I've looked into it, the more of those classifications I have no representatives for. So there'd be nothing to say because I've got no plants. I don't plan on talking about Dendrobiums I haven't got. For me, there would be no point, and I wouldn't have the knowledge. I'm not looking up and getting to know about plants that I don't own. I do it the other way round. But this little group is a set. This is the classification for Mosaei, which is basically your black hair type. And when you start looking into the care for these, again, there are variables. And I mean, the first variable I've found, if you look at this one on the latest canes, you can see the little black hairs. And my recent acquisition here, you can see the little black hairs. And then you actually find out that Dendrobium senile is in this classification. Are those black hairs? Are they hell? They're white hairs, grey hairs. That's where it gets its name from, a grey-haired old man type thing. So this will be the last one that I bother with those classifications, and I thought a much better way of doing it is the sets of the care that they get. That to me makes more sense. And talking of care, this plant, this is a primary hybrid. It's Formosum and Infundibulum. This one here has got Infundibulum in it as well. That's a cross with Lowii. So this one's actually got a name, Formidable or Formidable. I think it's supposed to be pronounced the French way, but the others I've spoken to recently don't, so maybe I'm wrong. And then Dendrobium senile. Now, this one, Dendrobium senile, I lost my good plant. And the explanation of why I lost it will introduce us to some care, basically, or lack of it in my case. It was on a mount and it was growing fabulously. It was a good, strong, healthy plant. But the sphagnum moss was deteriorated quite badly. And you can see the nature of the plant. It's quite a squat plant. The canes, some of them are upright, some of them are pendulous. It seems to grow in all directions. But it was doing really well. And I took the moss off, and it had a good root system attached to the bark. And I thought, well, that's probably going to be just as happy with no moss. And I left it bare rooted. And during the rest of that year, this is last summer basically into autumn, the plant deteriorated. It didn't like being bare rooted. And instead of doing something about it, I let it go on the grounds it was about to go into its winter rest. And then as it happened, the winter rest didn't start till January instead of, beginning of December sort of time. And quite honestly, it never woke up. It went into that rest as a deteriorating plant. It was no longer strong and healthy. And quite honestly, the rest just killed it. So this rest needs caution. And the more times you see don't water or feed for over 2 months, the more times you should recoil in horror. Just don't do it. Do it along the lines, but not strictly by the book. I lost 3 plants during that winter rest. 2 of them, as I've just discussed, this one, the senile, and another one, went into the rest as very weak plants. I just shouldn't have rested them. I just shouldn't have done it. I'm only going to do the drier winter rest from now on with strong, healthy plants. Otherwise, if I have to sacrifice the blooms in the spring, so be it. The plant is more important. Okay, but as I say, this is a new acquisition. The trait for these is said that they have long-lasting blooms. Well, try telling it to this one. Lovely little blooms. I mean, my previous version did actually bloom without any proper rest. See, you change things and it all goes wrong. So it did bloom and it was a happy plant. And then I messed it up by trying to follow the rules. Yes, there are rules and there are ways of growing things, and if you deviate too much, in some cases you may lose your plant or you lose your blooms. Both if you lose the plant. But anyway, just on a point of order with care, this plant's got an outbreak. That must be showing up on the camera. I mean, I can see it from back here. At the base of all the canes are white things. Now, they don't look like scale. They don't look like mealybugs. So what they are, I'm not quite sure. Now, yesterday I sprayed the base of this plant with hydrogen peroxide. Hopefully an instant burning kill for whatever those tiny little things are. Well, they're still there, and it's virtually impossible with whatever they are to find out whether they're living or dead. But either way, this plant is not doing as well in recent times, and it hasn't bloomed for quite a while. And so, when things aren't going well, you change something. And the first thing is, it's going to come out of the pot and get a hell of a good clean off. And make sure that whatever that is completely washed off. Yeah? And the plant starts again. There are signs of some new roots around on this one. There are some pretty good roots down in the pot. Recent canes on this one. See, I mean, that's what I mean about the plant doing really well. That was a cane I grew. I mean, look at it compared with the others. It was a beauty. But it hasn't bloomed. This particular cross blooms directly out at the top of the canes as they get older. Not on the fresh canes. It looks like they need a year of being mature before they attempt to bloom. I mean, it looks like there's something possibly coming out the top of that one. Difficult to tell. I mean, when they get to their terminal leaf as such, on this particular plant, it isn't a terminal leaf, it's a terminal thing. And from that thing, the buds push out. They just haven't done it for quite a while yet. But you don't, strictly speaking, get a terminal leaf like in the true sense. So obviously this is the only new cane actively growing at the moment, and it's growing well, you know. But the rest of the plant isn't doing so good, so that one's coming out of the pot later today. Okay, now strictly speaking, these types need the cooling off a bit in the winter and the reduction of water and feed. But I'm going to qualify that because they bloom almost any time. Yeah, sometimes in midsummer. So it's not the treatment in the winter that triggers the blooms. So the rest isn't for the blooms, it's for the plant. It's trying to mimic where it comes from. Now you can normally tell if a Dendrobium is heavily deciduous, in other words it grows its new canes and then through the winter promptly dumps all the leaves. That's true deciduous Dendrobiums, and there are some. And they have adopted that way of life simply because they come from deciduous forests, so during their growing season they're shaded. They're also warm and they're wet. That's when they put on their growth. For you to mimic that, keep them out of the bright light, you know, and feed and water them well. Do as they would do in the wild. But then come the autumn, the leaves drop off, the rains slow down to next to nothing, and the moisture they would get is probably not much more than morning dew, an occasional shower, and some misty, foggy days due to the terrain that they come from. So they're not bone dry. but they do get bright light in the winter. And to accommodate what to them is a rather harsh environment, given their nice warm, damp, shaded, lush growth period, they're now into harsh times. So they dump their leaves, just like the trees do. It's their way of coping with the hard times. Yeah? And then come the spring, the temperatures start to climb, and it'll respond by coming back to life. And if it's a late winter, early spring bloomer, the first bit of life that you normally see on those are the buds. But anyway, as far as this one is concerned, this has always had, and it's always worked. As I say, the fact that the plants are deteriorating a bit at the moment is not subject to any changes I've done, so it's got to be the plant, and it could be whatever those bugs are getting at the base of the plant. But I'll deal with that. So the treatment this one gets is what I call the winter rest of no choice. In other words, it stays in the grow room. The temperatures are cooler because I live in the UK. And just discussing, I forgot in my first video to go over temperatures. I don't do temperatures per plant. I just can't. I only have one grow room. With the exception of the stuff going up in the bedroom for the winter, they're separate. But in the grow room, during the late spring, summer and into the autumn, the nighttime temperatures very rarely go down below 18. They tend to hover between 18 and 20. And the daytime temperatures go to wherever they want to go until my cooling off process kicks in, which is my extractor fan and my inlet fan that brings in cooler fresh air. And it normally, on a sunny day, that's not boiling hot outside, will hover between 28, 29. That's with good humidity as well. The humidity drops a little, but 3 foggers just kick it back up again. So that's okay. Now, when the temperature outside is hot, and that's up around 30 degrees, that fresh air coming in is already at 30 degrees. So obviously there's not a lot of cooling goes on. But I still manage to hold it at around 30, 31 tops. So that's my late spring, summer and autumn temperatures with good humidity throughout. As we head into autumn, the temperatures start to drop at night. Now, I've got 2 ways of heating this place and stopping the temperatures dropping down too much. One is called opening that door when I go to bed. Obviously the house is kept at human comfort levels. And when I go to bed, I'm tucked up under the covers. So the temperature down here in the ground floor, it excuse me, doesn't matter to me anymore. So by opening this door, the residual heat from the whole of the downstairs drifts into here and saves me needing a heater. So I save on costs. Heating is your biggest cost, really. So that's what I do. Now, when we start getting a real cold snap and the daytime temperatures aren't coming up much and the nighttime temperatures are down near the freezing or below, just opening that door won't be enough. By the time it gets to the morning, this thing out here, the grow room, would probably be down 10 degrees or even lower. And even though there's a few plants out here that would love that, they're not getting it because the rest don't like it. So I have a heater on a thermostat. And that kicks on at 13.5 degrees and then maintains a temperature between that and about 15. So that's my nighttime temperature maintained at that level, which for true intermediate is fine. For the warmer end, like the Phalaenopsis, that's not so good. It's a bit cool. So the Phalaenopsis come into the house during the winter. So that solves that problem for that group of plants. There may be 1 or 2 others come indoors this winter, I'm not sure. It depends how harsh the winter is. So that's where we go then. Now, most orchids like a difference between day and night temperatures. Well, when we're in the cool of the winter, that's not so easy for me to do. As I said, I've got a heater. I'm quite happy to use that or the open door principle for my nighttime temperatures. But to get the differential, to get the daytime temperatures up 3 or 4 degrees C, which is about the minimum, sometimes I have to heat during the day, which I don't like because that's starting to get expensive. But what's the cost of replacing quite a few plants because they've stayed too cold? So I balance the two. It's my hobby. If I have to spend a bit now and again, so be it. But you know, if you're not going to grow in the home and you're going to go outside somewhere, depending on where you live, in most instances you're going to have to be prepared to supply some heating, even if it's only nighttime heat, and it costs money. So if you're not prepared to do that, don't take the path. Simple answer. But anyway, this one needs a going over. This is a new plant. I'm not desperate to repot that because I know where it's come from. That will be in reasonable media and it won't have been in there a silly long time or anything. It's obviously a blooming size plant, and it's bloomed on its latest growth. I don't see any more new growths coming on behind, so I've got to wait. But the blooms on here are probably going to last quite a while. The blooms on this last quite a long time, if it ever gets round to doing it again. This one is not going to get a winter rest this year. When I got this, what I thought was one big plant, one big happy plant it looked like, I would have been prepared to put that into the winter rest. But as it happened, it was lots of pieces. It wasn't one big plant. And as such, some of those pieces are small, young plants in the main with single new growths on them. They haven't got the strength to take a winter rest. So this year, this winter, this one is staying in the grow room. And it will get watered along with the other plants. It will be allowed to dry in between those waterings, because if I keep it soggy, I could induce some rot, as it's a young plant with a very poor, each of these pieces have got next to no roots. So I'm going to try and keep this one growing from now. Hopefully it will push some new roots soon as it gets used to this place and acclimatized. And then I will keep it going until not this winter but the following winter, and by then I should have a set of reasonably strong healthy plants and I'll consider resting it. Okay, so that's really what I'm doing with those three, and I've taken the opportunity to go over my temperature ranges. Now obviously this is a little set of videos about Dendrobiums, but those temperature ranges are for everything that's in here. So they apply to virtually all my orchids, with the exceptions of those that go up in the bedroom in the winter, and this will only be the second winter I've even tried that, and those that come into the house, which is Phalaenopsis, and it might be a couple of others this time. I really do think I ought to bring my Psychopsis indoors. They're warm growers, and that may have been what set them back a bit, was being out here in the cold for the winter. But we'll see how we go. That, to be discussed and finalised when we get to the winter. We're not there yet. We're in mid-season. And talking of that, we are just past the midway point of what I call the growing season here in the UK. So my new canes on some of the other Dendrobiums I'll get round to probably in the next video should be halfway to their maximum size. We're halfway through. Now some of those do grow on. I do have a couple of exceptions that just seem to keep growing and don't take any flipping notice of the time of year, so they get different treatment. But we'll get to those. So that's a little set. They are in the same classification, but certainly the treatment for these two and the treatment for that one are quite different. These two need to dry out between waterings in the winter. They will slow down. They're okay with the cooler temperatures in the winter. That's what they would get where they live. I know they're hybrids, but they're primary crosses. And infundibulums in both of those. The other two that are one in there, Lowii, and that one for Mosum or whatever it was. They come from similar areas and require similar treatment. So the fact that they're hybrids makes no difference. You can just pick on either one of the species and treat it like that and it'll be fine. So cooler temperatures in the winter will be fine, but they stay in the grow room. They don't need cold temperatures. They just need to cool down a bit, preferably with some cooler nights. And because they come from deciduous forests, they need some good light in the winter. Yeah? So they change their aspect. You know, normally we're trying to give our orchids as much light as possible. But there are some that I think appreciate being more shaded in the growing season. You're mimicking a deciduous forest. And when the tree canopy's up and running, it's shaded. It's also wet. It's also warmer. So that's your summer treatment basically. And then to mimic autumn, obviously the temperatures are going to drop a bit. It's not going to rain as much. Rain tails off. It doesn't stop dead on a particular calendar date. The world isn't like that. You can't find any part of the world where you can say on this date it doesn't rain anymore for 2.5 months. Let's get real world, shall we? So, you know, you can reduce your watering as your temperatures start to drop down and your plants will slow up. Now when a plant slows up it doesn't use as much water, and if it's not growing that much it doesn't really need feed, does it? Now there's another dispute here, that some of the plants that go into a proper winter rest, you shouldn't stop feeding them, you should just cut the nitrogen out. Because you're actually continuing to give the plant some strength and energy and the tools to do the job of forming those buds. Now I haven't tried that yet, but that doesn't sound a bad idea. Now some of these ideas you either take on board or you don't. You know, these are your choices with your plants. But I'm willing to try different things on plants that could be doing better. My plants that do really well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Hang on, that's my phone. Okay, sorry about that, but when the phone goes off you've got to answer it. That means I've got half a cup of cold coffee, but what I've got is the best news I could have had. The cat's been found. It was just wandering around outside the flats. My daughter went out to get it and it just ran away scared. So obviously it's spent all this time avoiding human contact, which probably means she hasn't had any food. I mean, cats will find water, that's not a problem, but yeah, so she's back in the flat, back at home, and everything's fine. A bit thin, apparently, but then she was a waif of a flipping cat anyway. She's always been a tiny cat. She looks like a kitten, even though she's 4 years old. But she's back home, so, you know, she can get some food now and get rehydrated properly and settle back down. That's about the best news I could get today. Anyway, I'm going to break this one off now because that changes my day as to what I need to do and various things. So this is quite a lot of information in this video that's not directly due to the plants that we're looking at, but is still additional information about the way I'm looking after my Dendrobiums, and I'll get on to more specific plants in the next one. But the idea of splitting them up by their classifications just isn't going to work. So I'm going to split them up into the type of care sets, which are my own made up sets. So we'll do the ones that are definitely going to get the winter rest and why and how and all that. We're going to get the ones that get what I call a partial rest. That's another set. And then the other set is those that don't really need a rest, but they're going to get a bit of one anyway because they're going to stay in the grow room through the UK winter. So they get, it's almost like a forced rest. But they're the ones that are classed as continuous growers. They don't get a true dormant period ever. In their natural environment, they grow continuously, sometimes a bit quicker, sometimes a bit slower, because they don't get as much moisture. Another point, I don't know whether I mentioned this because I broke off, it's been quite a big gap actually, long conversation, but when you get the orchids where the rain's reduced to next to nothing, and this is where you get this implied drier, brighter winter rest. Deciduous forest types, leaf cover's gone, rains have slowed right down to not very often at all, you know, but they do get morning dew. Now, if you think of the principle of the way morning dew forms, it's condensation effectively. It forms where it is. So there's not a lot of running water going on everywhere. So although the roots get condensation on them and there is some moisture, what level of feed do you think would be in that moisture? And your answer should be virtually none. So you can see where this idea of don't fertilise comes from, because the moisture they're getting is from mist and fog. Well, that hasn't got nutrients in it as such, has it? And nor has dew to a greater extent. It just isn't. It's just hydration in much lower forms than pouring with rain nearly every day. So just bear that in mind, you know, when you're thinking about resting type plants of any sort, really, is the moisture that these Dendrobiums would get is just that. You know, there's a bit of rainwater now and again, because it doesn't stop raining full stop. Like I said, you know, the calendar doesn't decide when it's going to rain. It's a climatic thing, and there'll always be exceptions. You know, I'm sure in the rainy season there are periods where it doesn't rain. You know, and the same in the dry season. There's periods when it does rain. You know, it's not a definitive thing. So certainly those that come from deciduous forests where their moisture is basically geared up to condensation, morning dew and mist and fog, their feed levels would be virtually zero throughout that period until the rains start again. And once the rains start, obviously the nutrients and things are washed down from above, which is the way they work. So bear that in mind. Okay, I'll leave this one for now then, and I'll get on to something different in the next one. What I'll probably do in the next one is the continuous growers and how I treat those throughout my 4 seasons. And it's the seasons that dictate how I treat them, because I have to. You know, I have to bear in mind a plant that's not growing much, if hardly at all, doesn't use water and doesn't need much feed. So I do apply that logic, even though it's a continuous growing plant. So we'll come on to those later. Okay, thanks for dropping by, and see you next time. Just a little add-on, my little charger has got off the slow boat from China and arrived, and it works. It's not as described, because it was supposed to have a mains connection, which it hasn't got. It's only got a USB connection, which makes it a bit of a faff and will slow down the charging rate. But basically I can just charge up all the batteries, which will give me probably weeks worth of batteries before I need to charge them again. And obviously as one runs out, I can set it up and charge it again. So at least I'm mobile. I'm still tethered at the moment until at least one of the batteries gets fully charged, but it's in progress. We have the means to charge the batteries, which proves it was the charging element on the camera that was at fault, and this is the workaround. So we'll be up and running back to normal shortly.